Welcome into an Inside Carolina Live post-game show. Carolina just mollywops Virginia Tech up in Blacksburg, 91-59. Everything going right for North Carolina tonight. Rob, just overall thoughts, and we'll dig into the specifics. But I tell you what, Roy Williams once said, everything looks better when the ball goes in the basket. This North Carolina team looks pretty daggone good when that ball goes in the basket.
It's true, Tommy, and that was definitely part of the story. But as I was watching the game, that wasn't my entire takeaway. I think Carolina could have won this game pretty easily, even if they had not shot the three so well, because they were doing a lot of other things that they've tried to do all season. They were getting out in the open floor. They actually were creating some live ball turnovers. Virginia Tech gave them some help, but still, they were committing. They were forcing those turnovers. They were scoring on the other end. They were playing at the tempo that they wanted. They were moving the ball around. Guys were not only making threes, but they were getting the types of threes that they wanted from the corners that they set up the offense to get. And so that a lot of things went right. But yes, I mean, it's hard to overlook over 50% on threes. But at the same time, I thought it was more comprehensive than that. And I was trying to kind of come up with an adjective to describe the beating. And I think mollywop is better than any of mine.
Old school mollywopped. A couple things that stood out, and I listened to Jones and Tyler Zeller today to have a different perspective, and I like listening to Tyler, but he talked about the body language of Carolina, the mental space it looks like they're in, and they're having fun, and their heads are up, and it's a confident bunch. The trick is in sport in general, especially basketball and all sports really, is to have that same confidence and same positive vibe energy when things aren't going well. And that'll be the test, obviously, coming up this weekend. But Rob, it is amazing to me to see the difference in this team. And this is irregardless, which is in the dictionary, so it's a word now, of level of competition. The difference in the mental space that this team appears to be in. Is that just me overthinking this, or are you seeing that too? Because this looks like a confident, together bunch over this last several weeks, and that's a good thing for Hubert Davis and the team.
For sure. I think it's a chicken and egg situation where they are buying in more, so they're having more success, but they're also having more success, and that's causing them to buy in more, because the winning breeds on itself. And so you have this massive win streak for this team's standards, the best one of the year. It's all conference games. Yes, it's lower lights, but it's still conference games, including some road games. And then they weren't supposed to win that game this way tonight. They weren't supposed to beat Florida State as badly as they beat them either. And so they are exceeding expectations for the first time all season. We're past the life and death Georgia Tech game, the narrow escape at Notre Dame earlier this year. They aren't having games like that right now. They're putting a lot of separation between themselves and these teams, and as you said, their body language reflects that. I think mentally they are in the best place they could be going into the Duke game. Will that be enough? Can you beat Duke with vibes? Maybe not. But I think this is their best shot. This is the best time they could possibly play them on their home floor. And they got everything done that they needed to get done in the interim between the last loss and this one to give themselves a chance to get an at-large bid. I think they could be that game away from getting one. So it's right there for them.
Yeah, Yogi Berra said it's half physical, 90% mental, some weird like that. Carolina's got my point is, Carolina, and your point is, Carolina's got the mental aspect of this game coming up, I think, in a good spot for them. We're talking with Rob Harrington, Inside Carolina postgame. Carolina wins 91-59 in Blacksburg. Shout out to the 421 people here for the postgame. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity, our sponsors on this show. And Rob, let's talk a little bit about individual performance, because, a lot of times we talk about individual performances when they're not good. And we're due to talk about when they are good. And we talk about Elliot Cadeau a lot. 2 points tonight, 1 for 4 shooting, 0 for 2 from 3, 12 assists, 3 turnovers. You take that all day from your point guard. And we haven't said that a ton with Elliot this year, but a game like this, 12 and 3, that's a nice performance from him. And he affected the game majorly even when he's not putting the ball in the basket. and he's not having a lot of silly fouls. I think that's another positive step forward for him, for the team.
That's true, and that was after sort of a rough first half where he had more fouls and more turnovers. The team went on a big run with him out of the game, and I thought that when the start of the second half, he immediately scores a basket. He made some other good plays. He didn't make any silly plays. The lob to Lubin later in the game, that was sort of the classic Cadeau jump up with the teammate. It's the most fun time to watch him, and certainly there you could go all the way down the list where a lot of guys played well. I was happy that RJ Davis played well and didn't play that much by his standards. You could see the wheels turning in Hubert's head, like I want to save him because he might go 38-40 on Saturday. So he didn't have to play a lot. Ian Jackson was awesome. He hit some NBA threes tonight, and I realized that his jump shooting is ahead of his ball handling still, and that showed up some tonight too. But it was just great. I mean, I never expected that he would shoot the ball as well as he had this year because he wasn't even reputed to be that great of a high school shooter. So to come in with a quick trigger, and these aren't wide open threes either. I mean, these are contested big time shots. Trimble, of course, was awesome. He's someone it's easy to take for granted because he has this blue collar style. But I thought that his physicality on both ends of the court, and especially defense in the first half, sort of put the game away. And he's been doing that a lot recently. I think Hubert is settling into a rotation, acknowledging that all these guys should play more on the merits. And yet he's starting to meld them together. And because they're winning, I think that's enabling everyone to accept these lesser roles than they probably would be entitled to in a different situation.
Yeah, somebody in the chat said Carolina baseball 12-0. They're actually 13-0 now. That's why I was a little bit behind watching this game, trying to catch up. So put our post game, but Carolina won, walked off Coastal Carolina in Boshammer Stadium. But yeah, you talked about RJ Davis. How many times? And I realize he played 25 minutes, which I wonder is at his fewest this season so far. But how many times have we seen this year, Rob, RJ Davis with 6 shots? He was 5 for 6, very efficient, 15 points. He was the tied for fourth amount of shots on the night. I can't remember a game where RJ Davis took less shots than 3 other people for North Carolina. To your point, do you think it was Hubert Davis just letting him ease into it, or letting these other guys build confidence, or all of that together? Because I think you mentioned Ian Jackson, and if you're stepping back and ripping threes and then you're catching and getting into the lane, you become a different cover for a lot of people. What do you think the mindset was with RJ tonight, and RJ being able to be as efficient?
It was interesting because he came out shooting and he was hot, and typically, as you sort of posed the question, how often would you see RJ get off to a good start and stop shooting? And I think he recognized what was happening. He had a couple of turnovers too, and I think he loosened the reins on himself because these other guys were all playing well. He was making other good plays, and he probably was okay to take a step back, have a real efficient shooting night. The team is humming. A lot of different people are getting touches and baskets. There were some cool things happening too that had nothing to do with RJ. I think there was a play where I think it may have been for Trimble in the second half where Jalen Washington just sort of a dribble handoff, sort of a slow dribble handoff on the wing. And Trimble comes off, and then Washington pops out to the corner 3 and makes a 3. And defenses aren't looking for that because that's not how Carolina's offense is operated. So top of the key oriented. So I really like some of these new things that they're doing, or at least they are doing them more often. Stuff from the wing. You saw Ian Jackson get a lot of touches on the wing, whether as a shooter or a ball handler. And so now they're getting the stretching that they've been striving for all season. And I can't even attribute this, even though you and I have been touting Withers in the lineup for a while. It's not just the size of it. I think the team is shooting better for one thing, but a lot of people are now looking for their shot, and it's forcing defenses to scramble.
Yeah, I mean, and it was a couple times. Look at the shooting. Cadeau 1 for 4. I've mentioned it. Davis 5 for 6. Powell 4 for 6. Lubin 5 for 6. Withers had a tough night. Him and Hubert had a conversation in the second half. That'd be interesting to see what was there. I'm not sure Hubert liked the palms up thing there, but you got Trimble 6 for 10. Ian Jackson 6 for 10. Carolina shoots 59% on the ball game. One thing that I noticed, and Rob, this is another thing that helps the outside shooting certainly, is that they were having to dig to stop Lubin, to help out on Lubin. Now, I don't know if they needed to do it, but they were doing it. It was allowing guys to get open. That's been the issue all year, right? Having a big that could to have some gravity to pull something off the 3-point line. But we saw that tonight. The question is, can they repeat that? Or will Duke even worry about that on Saturday? I tend to doubt it. But your thoughts on that aspect?
I separate it. The Duke analysis is just different, and that's even compared to other elite teams because they're such a huge team. It's just a real tough matchup for Carolina centers, especially someone like Lubin who's undersized and plays inside. So even if he doesn't have a good game against them, I won't necessarily read that as, oh, well, he's reverting to the mean. Yeah, I'm hesitant to even mention this because I've been wrong every single time I've said it this year. I feel like Lubin has established himself as the top center. Every time I say that about him or Washington, it flips immediately. But I think now, here we are in March. To me, he looks like the clear number one, and the team understands that he's the clear number one, the way that they're looking for him. And this is why I'm happy that they finally settled on a rotation because there's role clarity. So I think you're right. That has helped a lot. I was smiling when you mentioned the Withers-Hubert exchange. I would like to be a tape recorder in the room when someone asks Hubert that question to see how he would obfuscate the answer, because he's not going to want to get into it. I'll be curious to read the post game at IC. I'm sure someone will ask, and he'll have an interesting answer that probably doesn't really answer it. But that was an interesting exchange. I thought not a huge deal, just one of those competitive moments. Player does something coach doesn't like, but he put him back in the game pretty quickly. So I thought that was a pretty clear signal too, that he wasn't really in the doghouse. Just whatever the issue was, maybe he barked something at Hubert he shouldn't have. At any rate, I got a kick out on a game like this when you're winning so handily. That type of thing is easy to gloss over.
Yeah, absolutely. It was something that you're like, they don't need that right now. But to your point, they put him right back in, and yeah, I'm sure the question will be asked, probably being asked as we speak here on the post game. I'd be surprised if some of our crowd there in Blacksburg doesn't ask it. But we're talking with Rob Harrington. Let me do a couple things. Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. Go get your swag there. We need to get Rob some swag from Johnny T-shirt. Send it up north so he can stay warm or look fresh in the summertime. It's about that time in Chapel Hill. Go see Johnny T-shirt. Get your 10% off your order if you're an Inside Carolina Premium subscriber. Also, Matt at congruityhr.com. Small to mid-sized business hookup. Email Matt at that address and ask him for help for an assessment for your small to mid-sized business, and they can help you out and load you up on all the knowledge you need to grow your business. Rob, we've been beating around the bush. We've mentioned it a couple times. I'm not sure it comes down to the Duke game. I think you're pretty firm in the camp that it comes down to the Duke game, because I think if they can win a game or two for sure in the ACC tournament, they can get in the dance. But you mentioned Duke. The Duke scout is just so different. We're talking about Lubin. He's 6'8", 6'7", 6'8". Malawach is 7'2", with a wingspan of dang near 10 feet. So they'll just put him in the middle. How does Carolina approach this Duke game, and how do they approach it differently than we saw a month ago? The size in the starting lineup will surely be different.
Yes.
Going in.
That's number one. Number two, they're just going to have to. They didn't do this the first time, and you and I talked about it going into that game. They just have to live with a lot of threes. They're going to have to take at least as many as they took tonight, and they're just going to have to make them. I don't think they will have success driving into the teeth of that defense. I mean, no one's having success driving into the teeth of that defense. They have to hope that whoever is the hot hand, ride that person and just try to compete life and death on the glass. Now, hold your own there as best you can. They actually did okay the first game that way, albeit in a non-competitive situation. And I don't have the expectation that they'll win that game. I do have the expectation that they will be competitive this time and play with a lot more pride. I think everyone would, at minimum, expect that much. Now, from a tournament perspective, I look at Duke on Saturday as opportunity one. if they win that game, they might be in without having to do anything else, conceivably. Because it's not only the value of that win, I would argue it would validate the win streak. Because right now it's a win streak, but you haven't beaten anyone. But if you beat Duke, it makes all the other wins look better. It's like, oh, actually, this team's playing really well, culminating with a Duke win. I think that might be enough. Of course, it depends on what other teams do. Even if they lost on the Wednesday or the Thursday, in their first game of the ACC tournament, they might be in. Even if they lose, I think they are now set up where if they beat, of course, they beat Duke in the ACC tournament, but or if they beat Clemson or Louisville, that might also be good enough. I think because whatever the case would be, you're talking about winning something like 7 out of 8 games if that happens, and you start to look like a pretty good team at the end of the year. And even if officially that's not included on the team sheets that the selection committee uses, I am sure that at least some of the people on the committee will take an eye and put it on how the teams finish the year. I certainly would, because if your best wins in November and someone else equivalent record to you did a lot better in February and March, I would absolutely favor the team playing better at the end of the year. So I think they have 2 chances: Saturday, number 1, and then get at least 1 Q1, maybe 2 Q1s. It gets a little dodgy if they can't win on Saturday, but they're in it. They have a shot.
All you can ask for at this point is having a shot, and Carolina certainly got it. When you've got a league as bad as the ACC, you get a shot at the top dogs in it, and this year Duke's obviously the top dog in the league, probably the country. Um, I'm not gonna show that bias there, but I'd like to see the top teams in the SEC. All Duke have to go through that crowd to get to a national championship, but Duke in a single game situation in the Dean Dome against North Carolina, we can see what happens. It'll be a wild and crazy. Drew's having fun in the chat talking about all the talent that'll be in Chapel Hill. There'll be plenty of talent on the basketball court and on the baseball field in this weekend with Stanford coming to town. Rob, real quick, just looking at the national scale, and we're talking about a post game that Carolina blew out Virginia Tech, and we're talking about Carolina's potential tournament opportunities going up against Duke. Nationally, are there any elite teams beyond Duke and Auburn to you this year? I mean, it seems like the entire country is down, not just the conference. Of course, the SEC is kind of stacked.
You're right. I think your last point's an important one. I don't know how good these SEC teams are because they're top to bottom so strong. The records might be deceiving. There's no question that Duke and Auburn, at least in my mind, are the class of the country. Last year, I thought there were 4 elite teams. This year, I think there are 2 at least. We'll see what happens in the tournament. Certainly, there are very dangerous teams. I think Alabama is super dangerous. And among others, it's not going to be the big guy dominated thing like it was last year with UConn and Purdue, but it will be. I don't think that either Duke or Auburn is invincible. I don't think Duke is as good as they were in 1999, for example. They aren't that scary, but this is one of the better Duke teams I think in the past 15 years, maybe one of the top 3 or 4, and they're going to be real tough to beat because of the way they clamp you down. From the Carolina perspective, obviously we're not talking about a team that's probably going to make a Final Four run, but boy, it would be fun for them to be an underdog. If they could get in the tournament, somehow win an 8-9 or a 7-10 type game, and then take their shot at one of these teams, maybe not Duke or Auburn, but one step down from that, they wouldn't be placed with Duke, but one step down from that, I think they could. Maybe this is just the optimist to me. I still think they could put a charge into some of these teams. Well, on a night like this, obviously, if they shoot threes really well, but I think this team is a pretty challenging matchup for some of these slower tempo squads. If they could get out and run, it could be interesting, just like Baylor.
Yeah, I mean, once you get in, you have a shot. And Carolina, look, if Carolina hits 15 threes, if any team hits 15 threes against anybody, I like their chances to win. Carolina and Duke on Saturday. Any final thoughts, Rob, before we get into that one? I mean, after Duke, it's the ACC tournament. I cannot believe it is March the 4th. This basketball season started way back in early November, and here we are with one regular season game to go. just looking at the Duke game, I don't think you and I get to talk for Duke post Duke. So, just your thoughts on this entire season. So far up till now, however you want to put it, depending on what happens in the next week, really.
I think we're pretty well teed up on Duke. I think we know what the stakes are, not just tournament wise, but the team has to show something and not embarrass the program on its home court. I would, though, there was some interesting news, and I wanted to touch on this while we're here about the settlement with Clemson and Florida State in the ACC. And now that there will be a known price to escape the ACC with your possession of your media rights. So the question is, and we IC staff were talking about this today some, how much longer will Carolina be in the ACC? How many more regular season finales will we get to talk about? Because it may only be 3 or 4 before that exit fee drops substantially, especially if Clemson and FSU leave, where it may not make sense for the Bill Belichick era football Tar Heels to play in the ACC anymore. And they're going to drag the basketball program with them, of course. So we may be, in the twilight of the ACC era, whatever it turns out to be, whether the conference gets better or hopefully will not get any worse. And so for my part, I'm trying to soak up all these years because there may not be too many left. I think when that settlement was announced, the writing was on the wall now that it's not just that teams want to leave. There is a way out. And I think at minimum, Clemson and Florida State will take it. And if Carolina is as serious about football as they seem to be all of a sudden, then I would imagine that they would follow shortly behind.
Like Buck Sanders says, first train smoking if I'm Carolina and I'm going south. I'm a Southern guy. I'm going south. We're going to the SEC. But yeah, that settlement changes the game for sure. We'll see how it impacts everything. But you're right. It is the twilight. I feel like we're two old guys sitting there talking about back in my day. But yeah, Duke, North Carolina season finale in the Dean Dome might not be a thing for terribly too much longer. It'll be an interesting take. But yeah, changing landscape. The tide does not only rise all ships, it takes all ships with them. And we'll see. And obviously football is the tidal wave these days. That is Rob Harrington. It has been a Inside Carolina post game that we end talking about holistically the whole ball of wax. Duke and Carolina on Saturday. Carolina beats Virginia Tech by a lot. It's Inside Carolina post game, sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and Congruity. As always, Rob, thank you, and as always, thanks 600 folks come see us on a Tuesday night. It's all about the fans, and we hope you guys enjoyed the show. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.